what I want to talk about is how to avoid the biggest scam inside and outside of home business, and at the same time prevent massive financial loss, both for yourself and perhaps for people that you love. And if you'll tune in and pay attention to what's about to follow, you can be armed, you can be equipped to quickly recognize scams that can drain your bank account, drain your life savings, hurt you, set you back in a major way financially. And this happens way more than I would like to admit, unfortunately, hence the purpose of this training, hence the purpose of this video. So I want to start off with a story. This happened about a year or two ago, and I was at a church gym. We were actually having a little bit of a family reunion, and I was talking to one of my best friends who's also my cousin. She was my roommate in college, and I love her very much. She loves me very much. We're really, really great friends. And we were talking about investments, and she started to relate to me about this new investment that her and her husband had gotten involved with and how excited they were about it. And she started to tell me that it's in silvers and it's in the silver market. And there's this guy in their local town. They live down in Utah. This was in Salt Lake City where this transpired. And this guy had been running this rare coin business. It was a family business that had been in the family for decades. Not only that, but this guy that was running it, he had a lot of credibility. He'd been featured on major news outlets, TV stations. He had a lot of pull within the community, a lot of high-level connections. And in addition to that, he also had ties within the church that my cousin was attending. And so all of that was to let me know that, wow, this is a really trustworthy guy. And she starts telling me about this investment. And as she continues to talk, she starts saying things like, yeah, we just, we gave him our money and we're producing these crazy returns. It's like, 0.5% a day or 1% a day, 30% a month returns. And it's just insane. We don't even have to do anything. And we're just getting these big returns, and how exciting this is. And as I start to question my friend, I say, oh, well, that's interesting. He's been dealing in rare coins. What exactly is he doing with the money? And she starts to tell me, well, he's got this thing where, the paper silver market has a lot of margin. It's fluctuating a lot. And so he's got this ability to take money and invest it in the silver paper market, and it's producing these crazy returns. And he just, he wasn't going to let anyone in on it. But one of his close friends said, hey, people are hurting. They need help. This is too good to not, let some people in on. Can you please let me in on this deal that you've got going on? Then he didn't want to let him in, but finally this one guy talked him into letting him in. And then what happened was he saw the good that it was doing for this guy's family, and his heart just started to go out to all the people who were struggling. And so he realized that maybe we should let a few more people in. I mean, we've really got a good thing going. We want to help people. Let's let some people in. And so long story short, that's how my cousin got involved. A friend in their local neighborhood told him about it. And this particular friend, by the way, had actually been also in the jewelry business for decades. So this person also had credibility and gave it his stamp of approval. Well, as my friend and cousin continued to talk to me, my red flags started to go up. And I said, I don't know, this doesn't sound right. This sounds a little bit like a Ponzi scheme. And she said, no, it's totally legit. And I said, well, where exactly is the money coming from? And she couldn't tell me that. But she could tell me that, well, there are people that they know, they've been to the location, they've seen the silver deposits, and so it's legit. But where exactly is the money coming from? And why are they willing to pay you such high returns? Couldn't answer those questions. Well, long story short, she went her merry way. I went my merry way. About a year or so later, maybe a year and a half, I'm out in my office and I get a phone call from my wife. And my wife says, Paul, is that thing that your cousin was doing, was that called Russ Rare Coins? And I said, boy, I don't know. That sounds really familiar. And I said, why do you ask? And she said, because I just saw a news article on the internet. And let me show you this. Rust Rare Coins. I just saw a news article of how Rust Rare Coins was invaded by the FBI. And the government seized their assets, froze their funds. And this is actually the latter part of the story. Owner of Rust Rare Coins sentenced to 19 years in prison for running a fraudulent silver trading program. My heart sank, and I called my cousin immediately, and I said, hey, is that thing that you guys were doing, was that called Rust Rare Coin? And there was a little bit of a pause, and she said, yeah, why? And I said, oh, no. I said, there's a news article up that, they just got their assets seized. And she said, you're kidding me. She goes, I got to go. I'll call you back. Hangs up the phone, researches what's going on, discovers that, indeed, this Rust Rare Coin has been halted by the government. There's more details to the story, but the point is, unfortunately, my friend and my cousin, who I love very much, an amazing person, their family was set back financially significantly. We're talking hundreds, like six-figure plus, multiple six figures, poof, gone. Assets seized, with maybe a little teeny tiny hope of, hey, if they seize all the assets and they sell them all, will some of the people get their money back? For the most part, no. The lawyers, the attorneys, the legal proceedings, they eat up, whatever profit there usually is in those kind of things. And my cousin's case was sad, really sad. But my cousin's young like me, and she's got a positive attitude, and she found the lessons in the setback, and they've moved on, and they're making lemonade out of lemons, and I'm so happy for them that they're doing that, and they're recovering slowly. I'm still recovering from that setback, but her story was one of the good ones, because in this same story, you had story after story of elderly people that had taken their entire retirement funds and put it into this thing. You had stories of people not just taking their retirement funds, but getting mortgages on their homes that they had paid off to invest in this thing. You have stories of people being completely wiped out through this thing, through this Ponzi scheme. And the extra sad part about all of this is that every single heartbreak in this story could have been avoided with some good information. And so that's the goal of me producing this piece of content. I want to give you, hopefully, some good information that can help you spot these types of things and stay away from them so that you can continue moving forward on your path to financial freedom instead of having these huge, big setbacks. Because obviously there were some things that I was aware of and knew that caused me to be able to spot that early on. So that's what I want to do. I want to cover just a few tips. This is quickly how you can spot these types of things. And by the way, the story that I just shared with you has nothing to do with home-based business. But guess what? Ponzi schemes are prolific in home-based business as well. It's the same thing. It just pops up in a different costume in different places. So if you can understand these quick little points that I'm going to give you, you'll be able to spot these wherever they're at, whether they're in home business or not. So the first one, the first red flag indicator is unusually high returns on investment. So anytime someone ever says to me, hey, Paul, I found this thing that's paying out 1% a day, 2% a day, 3% a day, 0.5% a day, ding, 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 ding. My red flags go off, my red lights pop on, because that is a key indicator that something could be off. Now, I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but it's a key indicator that something could be off. And why is that? It's because in normal investments, the returns are usually never really that high. Sometimes you can get really high returns, but here's the thing. Usually those high returns come from someone who is actively involved in bringing value to the investment. These high returns never come from passive investors that have no value other than throwing a little bit of money in, right? If you're actively involved, yeah, you can find deals. You can buy things and turn them around and flip them for 50 or 100% profit. Yeah, that can happen. But if you have that ability, if you have that skill, why would you ever reach out to someone else and say, hey, I'm going to give you this unusually high return for no value added other than, hey, just give me your money. So that is a key indicator, an unusually high return. Be aware of that. If anyone ever says that, that's a key indicator. The second key indicator, and I'm calling this mysterious money methods. And mysterious money methods just means if you can't explain exactly where the money is coming from and why on earth you would be earning a return on that money, then odds are it is not a good thing to get involved in. And this actually leads me to the next point that's related. Legitimate businesses, they provide a real product and or a real service to an end consumer, aka a customer. So there's a deliverable. That's what you would call a real business. Well, if someone is telling you they can get you these high returns and you say, well, what's the product? And they can't give you a good answer to that question, or maybe they give you a superficial answer where they're like, well, it's just this thing you buy and it increases in value. Guys, that's not a product. That is not a product. What is the product? What is being sold? What is being delivered to someone in exchange for that money? And if they can't explain that to you in a way that makes perfect sense to your brain, why someone would be buying something and producing a profit, then that is another key indicator that you've run into what could be called a Ponzi scheme. Now, another couple of things to be aware of where a lot of people get tripped up. History, right? So a lot of times what these Ponzi people will do is they'll say, hey, this has been going for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. It's legit. We got a lot of people making a lot of money. And while I'm on this topic, let me also say this. Even if people are making money in the thing, that doesn't make it legitimate, because the way a Ponzi scheme works is let's say if I was running a Ponzi scheme, heaven forbid, I would say to my friend Mike, hey Mike, I can get you X amount return on your money, 10 grand, I can get you 1% a month return. Mike says, hey, that sounds like a good idea. Here's my 10 grand. So I got Mike's 10 grand. Then I go to my friend Nick and I say the same thing. Nick says, hey, that sounds like a good idea. Nick gives me his 10 grand. Now I got 20 grand in the pot, right? And I go on and on and on. And next thing you know, I got hundreds of thousands of dollars in this pot. And all I have to do is pay out a little teeny tiny percentage of that big money in the pot as that 1% return to each of the people, because I've got the majority of their principal. And that's how a Ponzi scheme works. That's how people can be getting paid in a Ponzi, but it still be a Ponzi. And these things can go for a long time. It's like a shell game, robbing Peter to pay Paul. How long can a Ponzi scheme go? Well, if you've ever heard of a guy named Bernie Madoff, if you haven't heard of him, I encourage you to look him up. His Ponzi scheme was running for 17 years. So Bernie Madoff was in these high social circles. He was actually the chairman of the board of the New York Stock Exchange at one point. So not only did he have history in his Ponzi scheme where people were making money and telling their friends about it, 17 years of history, but he also had credibility. And that's the other thing that people will use. They'll use credibility to say, they'll say something like, dude, this Bernie Madoff guy, he was the chairman of the New York Stock Exchange. It's legit. It's gotta be legit. Guess what? It wasn't legit. Just like my friend's situation where this guy had been running this rare coins business for decades, a lot of credibility, been featured on major news outlets, still not legit. So the bottom line is, Napoleon Hill said, one of the greatest weaknesses of mankind is his or her desire to get something for nothing. And I have that desire also a little bit. I love passive income. I love residual income. I love the idea of disconnecting my time from my money. And inherently, that means that I'm getting money without necessarily putting in the time. So in a way, you could say that's, get something for nothing. So I recognize that I have that. We all have that, right? But here's what I don't want to do. I don't want to give something for nothing in return. That's for sure. Especially 100 grand, 200 grand, 10 grand, 5 grand, any amount of money. I want a return on my money. And so this is where we all have to be aware that in the case of a Ponzi scheme, our desire to quote unquote get something for nothing can actually hurt us and the people we love in a major, major way. And so just a quick recap here on the two or three big red flags to look for: unusually high return on investment. That's a red flag. Mysterious money methods where you have no idea how the money is being generated. You don't know what the real product or service is. That's another one. Is it a real product or service that people are actually buying and getting value from? If there's not that, if it's just one of these things where, hey, just buy this thing and it's going to go up over time, that's a big red flag. So if you'll just be aware of these, they can help you avoid costly detours on your road to freedom. Thanks so much for paying attention to this information. Thank you so much for letting it sink in. And I hope that it really blesses your life as you continue to move forward.